Hiya folks, it's Jocelyn. Welcome to my channel. I have my recommendations for this round of LATINX-A-THON for you coming up, but before we get into those, just a couple of reminders. First, the LATINX-A-THON announcement went up a week ago today. I'll leave it linked in the cards for you if you needed more information, but the description will also be down below if you just want like a general rundown of what's happening. Second, it is not only me who's posting recommendations today, but all of the co-hosts for this round, so be sure to check out the other 3 channels. Yvette, Priscilla, and Andrea are people that I consistently get recommendations from, and so I'm sure whatever they decide to recommend for their videos will also be fantastic. Third, these are all going to be new recommendations for me in terms of LATINX-A-THON. They might not be new recommendations in general for my channel, but every year as we do these videos, I try and give different books than I have the year before. I still stand by every book I have recommended for this readathon, so if you're curious to see like another 20 or so, please be sure to check out my past videos. All right, that's enough preamble. Let's jump into this year's recommendations because I have 16. This year we only have 4 prompts, but they are all really broad. And so because of that, I'm trying to look at each prompt in a few different ways in hopes that at least some of the interpretations for the prompt will resonate with you. And even if you don't pick up the book that I recommended specifically, it'll give you an idea of what you do want to read. The first prompt that we have this year is to read a short work. The obvious thing is to read something very short. That's kind of what we were thinking when we came up with it. For a lot of people, reading a short book does give you that real easy sense of satisfaction because, I finished something. If that's the way you want to go and you want to be entertained, a picture book that I have absolutely loved and I would love for more people to read is Lights, Camera, Carmen, which was written by Anika Denise and illustrated by Lorena Alvarez. This picture book is about a young girl named Carmen who is so dramatic and so beautifully extra in every way you can imagine. I definitely identify with that sort of young child spirit. I myself grew up watching a lot of old 40s and 50s musicals and insisted on putting on different plays where I sang, danced, and acted for my family to watch. And Carmen does something very similar. I love the energy of the story. It is so fun and so precious. And Lorena Alvarez's illustrations are always so on point. I've recommended her in the past, just not one of the picture books she's illustrated, and so this year I had to make sure this one made on the list. It's one of my absolute favorite picture books, but I'm really hoping even more people get excited to read it this year. Also very short is the chapbook by Alan Pelleas Lopez called To Love and Mourn in the Age of Displacement. This is sort of an identity-focused poetry book, which I frequently talk about being ones that I like the best. I generally tend to enjoy poetry that is focused on something political or something social and a little bit less about nature or just abstract love. So Alan Pelleas Lopez is right in that pocket. I feel like there's not as much to say about poetry because generally it is short, and I think each collection hits different people in different ways. I highly recommend this chapbook if you're looking for more poetry from Latines. The third recommendation I have is a graphic novel, which is actually based on a short story. So it's not only short in its current form where it is illustrated, but is also based off of something short. That is City of Clowns, which is written by Daniel Alarcón and illustrated by Sheila Alvarado. Again, this is based on a short story, which is following a young man in Peru who is a journalist and is dealing with the aftermath of his father's death. He did not have the best relationship with his father, and his father now being gone has left so many conflicting emotions in him. The way this family deals with the loss is very interesting, and as is typical with grief, everyone sort of handles it very differently. His mother actually becomes quite close to the father's mistress and her children, and that's something that really rubs the main character the wrong way. The story itself is really fascinating, but even more than that, I love the illustrations for this. Since this deals so explicitly with grief, it is an evergreen recommendation. However, I feel like it would be a perfect fit for now because of the dark weight to it, especially if you're looking to break up your TBR with a graphic novel. The final recommendation I have for the short work prompt is a short story collection. Maybe you're actually someone who isn't that big into novellas or into one specific short story and counting it as read. I know for some people that doesn't fully compute with their brain, and that's fair. And so for you, I have a collection of short stories, and I wanted to give you one of my favorites, which is A Cuban's Guide to Quantum Santeria by Carlos Hernandez. This is an entirely speculative collection. Most of these stories are sci-fi in nature, and also most of them follow Cuban-American protagonists. If you've been on my channel before, you've probably heard how deeply I love Carlos Hernandez's middle grade series, Sal and Gabby Break the Universe. However, this was his actually first published work, and you get to see prototypes of both Sal and Gabby in this short story collection. Also, if you're someone who finds it a little bit more difficult to find Latina authors in speculative fiction, I feel you. We get so many contemporary and nonfiction things, but fantasy and sci-fi, even horror, I feel like it's a little bit harder to come by. This is one of my favorites. Prompt number 2 is to read something cozy. And cozy, again, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For me, one of the first things that I think of with cozy is middle grade, because generally speaking, these stories can talk about heavy topics, but they do it in ways that are uplifting and age appropriate for a younger audience, which reading as an adult makes it feel a little lighter. Because of that, I wanted to talk about a debut that came out last year, and that's The Dreamweaver by Reyna Allegre. This is a book following a young girl who was moving in with her grandfather on the Jersey Shore. She has moved around a lot with her father and her older brother, and her father's now gotten a new job close by in New York, but in the meantime, she's going to be living with her abuelo, who owns a bowling alley. This one I just love for a lot of personal reasons. For one, the character has both Cuban and white American family, as do I. I also kind of grew up a little bit in a bowling alley because my mother worked at one for a few years. And while I was never truly at a loss for other friends that were girls, I did identify as a bit more of a tomboy, and throughout the course of this book, we do get to see her sort of identifying with her femininity for the first time because she's had such a lack of it for so many years. In fact, this book actually opens up on her getting her period for the first time, and the men in her family aren't that great with dealing with it. There's a lot of really sweet moments here where she does get some girlfriends who she gets to talk to things about that felt so correct and so authentic, and I had such a good time reading this. I definitely don't think this book has gotten enough love, so if you are someone who's looking for something a bit more summery, a bit more contemporary, this is an option for you. Similarly, another contemporary that has some pretty low stakes, I have The Victoria in My Head by Janelle Milanes. I actually read this one the very first time I participated in Latinx Heritage Month on BookTube. There is a whole vlog of me reading it and weeping. This is a book that I find very cozy because, again, it's a bit low stakes, and it is another one that I feel like I saw myself in for the first time. Our main character, Victoria, is in high school and is still kind of learning who she wants to be. The story is really her battling against her parents' expectations and also just the confusing time that is high school and crushes and first boyfriends. I think this would also be particularly cozy for people who are into music. Every chapter starts with a song, and a playlist actually exists on Spotify for you to sort of follow along. I did know a fair few amount of the songs that were referenced, and it made them hit harder after finishing the book. This is another one I feel is super underrated, and I really just wanted another excuse to yell about it again, so here we are. And then I wanted to interrogate what else I found cozy, and for me, another thing that I enjoy, particularly with a group of people or with my family or with my partner, is watching movies. And so I had to mention Movies and Other Things, which is written by Shea Serrano and illustrated by Arturo Torres. If you're someone who loves popular movies, if you love big franchises and action movies, rom-coms, I think you'll get a lot out of this. This is a series of essays that are super conversational, and it almost feels like you're just sitting down with a guy who really loves movies and is just talking to you about them. And so if you're someone who enjoys talking about movies, thinking about movies, listening to other people talk about movies, you should absolutely pick this up. You don't necessarily need to have seen every movie that Shea brings up. However, having a good working knowledge of especially like big franchises, I think will help. Basically, as long as you're not looking for a book that talks about art house films and all of the newest things from Cannes, I think you'll be okay. It's a good amount of fun without having to put too much thought into it, and for me, that's cozy. My fourth and final recommendation for this is the ultimate cozy recommendation, because this is just a collection of folklore. That is Walking Words by Eduardo Galeano with woodcuts by Jose Francisco Borges. Eduardo Galeano apparently just sort of collected folktales, especially from rural areas in Latin America, and then just sort of presents and retells them here. Fairy tales, folklore, mythology, those sorts of ways of telling and interpreting a story are something that I find especially cozy. And I think a large part of that is because many of us, myself included, grow up being told these things as bedtime stories. It's really nice to have this collection of so many different kinds of Latin American stories in one. And something that I found even more impressive were the woodcuts that went alongside these stories. It's a very particular kind of art that I feel like puts these stories in their place in a way that maybe wouldn't have happened if they were presented without. I love the idea of taking traditional oral storytelling and combining it with a traditional type of art. And especially if you're looking for something to read right before bed for this readathon, this, I think, is the ultimate recommendation. The third prompt is to read something spooky, and let's be real, everyone has a different idea of what spooky means. I myself love horror, so I had to put at least one truly scary story on here, and that is Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. I think it's pretty safe to say that she has some thoughts about things that have happened in Argentina. All of her stories seem very pointed, and the more I learn about the history of Argentina as a country, the more connections I'm able to make with her work. In Fever Dream, we are following a mother who is waking up in a hospital bed, and by her side is not her own child, but a young boy who is insisting that she remember what happens to get her here. That is literally all I'm going to tell you for this, because the anticipation that is built here and the desire to learn what the hell actually happened to get her to this situation is so well done. This is absolutely a spooky read. I super recommend the audiobook for this as well. And it is short. I listened to this in like 2 sittings, and I think the less time you spend with it, the better. It has so much momentum, and I think if you break it up, it might not work as well for you. So if you're looking for something to scare the pants out of you that you just cannot stop turning pages for, please pick up Fever Dream. If you're not quite as into being scared as I am, another adult release that just came out that you might enjoy is The Inheritance of Orkidya Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This is a family saga, and we are following 2 timelines. The first is with Orkidya Divina herself when she's a young woman and just sort of setting out on her own from Ecuador, and then later we are following some of her grandchildren. At the start of the story, Orkidya Divina is basically on her deathbed. Her legs have become roots that are keeping her in place, and her family that has moved on to different corners, mostly in the United States, are all coming back to receive their inheritance. There is a lot here about family curses. There's also a circus element, which I did not know before I went in, but I was so happy to see. And there's also some spooky sort of almost magical realist or fabulous elements to this, mostly having to do with other body parts, sprouting plant things. For me, that's probably the spookiest part and something I enjoy because I kind of like body horror. But having said that, that is a light element for myself, but might be something extremely spooky for a different reader. It is a standalone as well, and it is a slower to medium-paced book. So if you wanted something that you can really take your time with for this readathon, you should definitely check this one out. And then maybe spooky to you means having ghosts, and if that is true, I have 2 middle grade recommendations for you. The first is Ghost Squad by Claribel Ortega, which is a debut that came out last year. This also takes place just before Halloween, so it is the perfect time, literally, to be reading this. And our main character and her best friend accidentally cast a spell that is awakening some not so nice ghosts. And with the help of her friend and her friend's grandmother, they rein it all in and save the town. I've already talked to you about my love of middle grade, and this is a perfect shining example of this. This is more of an adventurous fantasy, which tend to be the ones that I like the best, but I think it's just spooky enough to appeal to a really broad range of readers, especially ones who do enjoy Halloween and supernatural elements, but maybe aren't looking for horror. Along those lines, I would also recommend A Properly Unhaunted Place by William Alexander. In the world of this book, ghosts are very commonplace, and our main character is more than used to dealing with them. However, her mother gets a new job that brings them to a town that has absolutely no ghosts, and Rosa is determined to figure out why. Not having ghosts is unnatural, and she will not stop until she figures out the puzzle of what happened in this town. Also, in moving to this town, she meets a friend whose parents work at the Renaissance fair, and is filled with so many cute moments. This fantasy is obviously a bit further out from reality because ghosts are just so available, but there is such a good mystery at the center of it, and it reads so fast. I had a lot of fun when I got to this one, either last year or the year before, and it is another one that is just perfect for right before Halloween. Our fourth prompt is to read a seasonal book. The way I want to start with this recommendation is just visual. Things that to me look very autumnal. If you are in the Southern Hemisphere or anywhere else where autumn doesn't particularly mean dead leaves and browns and reds and oranges, these first recommendations might not be as relevant to you. The first one I wanted to mention is Bruja by Wendy Ortiz, which is seasonal to me in a couple of different ways. Firstly, again, with the title, Bruja, Brujeria, any sort of like witch or magical thing does bring to mind a certain time of year. I know that that's not necessarily true, but it is inextricably linked to an autumnal vibe for me. This is actually a dreamweaver, which is to say it is a memoir told in dreams. The memoir aspect of it, I would say, is extremely light. So if you're someone who doesn't really want a narrative memoir piece, this would probably work really well for you. In high school for a while, I had to keep a dream journal where I just wrote down my dreams as I remembered them every night. Sometimes they were shorter, sometimes they were longer, sometimes they were really out there. But the goal of it is just to keep track of your dreams. And this book is that, but published. I think it's really fascinating how differently everyone dreams. And if you do too, then I highly suggest this book. Another book that just going off the cover I had to recommend was Fire with Fire by Destiny Soria. This orangey, fiery cover is so autumnal to me. In here we follow two young sisters who come from a family of dragon hunters. They're more or less just going around with their regular daily lives until the younger sister accidentally finds and bonds with a dragon. This obviously puts into question everything they have grown up with, and the sisters' paths sort of deviate from there. One starts to change her mind about what she thought about dragons, and the other one is determined to bring her back to the right side. The tension between these sisters and the questioning of ideologies and histories that someone has been told are central to this story. This is also a standalone contemporary YA fantasy, which I feel like we don't get very often. And if you're also looking for something newer that features dragons and sisters, then this is going to be the pick for you. Thinking about people who aren't necessarily in the Northern Hemisphere or who don't think of this season and immediately go to aesthetic choices, I also wanted to give some recommendations that represented the season to me by thinking about school books. So the first is a book that I literally studied in school, and I think there is nothing more classically a school book than that. Many people are just starting back up at school right now, and a book that I had to read for grad school, and I'm so glad that I did, was Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Honestly, I do not see enough people talking about this book, but when I read it several years ago, this blew my mind. Paulo Freire very succinctly puts so many ideas into words that I had not been able to form myself at the time. This, I think, is a very seminal text for a good reason. The way he talks about the way that different groups are sort of pitted against each other so as to keep them from unifying against the bigger bad are all things that I think about frequently and that continue to be relevant in today's society. If you're someone who likes a little bit of political or social nonfiction, I think this one is a good one to add into the mix. From what I remember, this is pretty introductory, so if you're already deeper into those topics, you might not get as much out of this, However, just thinking about the context of which this came out of, and specifically looking at this through a Latin American lens, I think could be really fascinating and really enriching to many different types of people. Finally, my last recommendation still has to do with school, and it is pretty much an entire school year, and that is Charming as a Verb by Ben Philippe. Our main character is in his senior year of high school. He is also the child of immigrants. Both of his parents came from Haiti. He is so laugh out loud funny. I listened to this audiobook in a day because I could not get enough of Henry. This also has a pretty high romantic element in it. It's a bit of a rivals or enemies to lovers trope, kind of, except they don't actually all out hate each other. They just really don't get on or understand each other at the beginning. But this is just the perfect blend of a YA contemporary set in senior year of high school that fully understands how difficult and how scary that moment in time is. Henry has one dream school that him and his father have been talking about since he was a young child, and when it becomes clear that he might not get in, he really has to figure out how important this school is to him and how far he'll go to achieve his dreams. I haven't wrapped it up on my channel yet because I just read it, but I loved it so much. I need people to pick this book up. And I personally am going to go back to one of Ben Philippe's older releases because his writing style was so amazing and just the pick-me-up I needed. All right, folks, I have been talking for way too long. This is a super in-depth recommendation video, but I hope it's not overwhelming. All of the other recommendations that we have made in the past, myself and my co-hosts, will be in the playlist down below. Everyone is also posting new videos today. I hope that you watch as many as you can so you can get a bunch of different recommendations. I know my tastes don't line up with everyone's, but I hope I gave you a good sampling of things that you could potentially choose from. But otherwise, that is going to be it for me today. So thank you all so much for watching, and next week I'll be back to post my LATINX-A-THON TBR. Bye!